Hello, welcome to the James Cooley Show. It's your life. I'm your host, Dr. James J.C. Cooley, and I'm excited about today's show. I'm excited about all of them, pretty much, but today's show is special because we got a recurring guest, and she ain't been with us in about almost 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and I had begun to miss her and start thinking, Michelle, that she had forgotten all about us. But she with us today, and we're going to talk about a little history, and I'm excited about this topic that we're going to talk about. But I'm not going to give it away right now because that's you, Michelle. So wherever you're watching the show from, whichever platform or listening to the show, if you want to be part of the conversation, go to the comments and ask this great guest of ours any questions that you might have, because you might have some today. I might even have some today, but before we get started, I have to always invite my executive producer and co-host, Dr. Michelle Denise Cooley. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, doing good. I'm really excited about this guest today. I mean, like I said, she's like an honorary guest anyway, but we've missed having her on the show. And, she's going to educate us about, history, about the Supreme Court, but mostly about I'm just going to tell you what the title is when we get ready. But this is an educational show, and I'm really excited about it. Are you, James?
I'm excited about it, because we're talking about the Supreme Court Justice and its lifetime appointment. Um, I'm excited that we have two African Americans that sits on this court. We've got one male and one female, and one of the male is Clarence Thomas. We're going to find out a little bit of history about how he rose to the Supreme Court and some of the good and the bad things. So I'm excited about this show, and I cannot wait to get it started. So, Michelle, can you please do the honors and let our listeners and our viewers know the title of the show, the purpose of the show, and introduce this magnificent guest that's always on our show. We miss her.
Well, you gave away some of the title of the show. That is on me.
Well, you got it. It's back on you.
All right. Well, the title of today's show is Who is Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas? And we're going to have a conversation with our guest today, mitigation specialist expert Theresa Diamond. And we're going to talk about just a couple of things, how Justice Thomas got his appointment in what year, his background prior to joining the Supreme Court, any controversy surrounding his appointment, and talk about who is federal Justice Higgabotham. So Theresa Diamond was born and raised in the South Bronx in New York City. She attended public school and graduated from John Jay College of Criminal Justice with a BS in Criminal Justice Administration and Planning. She went on to gain employment in every arm of the justice system available to her. And after over 25 years away from academia, she returned to school and obtained her master's degree in community counseling and completed the first year of her PhD. She's held the following positions: civil investigator, criminal defense investigator, investigator for the largest county public school system in Atlanta, integrated the juvenile probation office in Washington State, integrated the civilian police department for the USA Navy at Banghar Submarine Base, court bailiff, clerk for judge and traffic court, and many more. She relocated from Atlanta, Georgia to San Diego after living there for 28 years. She's currently a mitigation specialist expert hired by various public defender offices in Southern California. Let's welcome back to the show, Theresa Diamond.
Hi.
Welcome back, Theresa. How you doing? How you doing?
I'm good. I miss you guys.
We miss you. I mean, we're reaching out saying, okay, when we're going to get Theresa back, and we have to educate our audience, and we have to always keep them in the loop. So,
Yes.
I'm
It was
excited
great
about
to be invited back.
well, you're going to get invited back on a regular basis. I'm excited about this topic that we're going to talk about today. I mean, very excited about it because there's good and bad in everything we do, and
Right.
we just have to point it out on the truth.
Right.
So before we get started, can you remind our guests that might have not seen you on the show before, or what is a mitigation specialist?
Well, a mitigation specialist It's usually one of four people on a defense team representing someone who's been charged with the death penalty. And our job, basically, in a nutshell, although it's much more than what I'm getting ready to state, we go into the person's background and look for mitigating factors that we want a jury to consider as a way to avoid the death penalty. It could be psychological, environmental, or a combination of all those things. We dig into the person's background for 3 generations because oftentimes a lot of minorities do not go to mental health facilities and things like that. So we have to go and so they're not diagnosed. And so it's an extremely intense, um, I call it a work of art, actually, because no two cases are alike. And so that's what I do.
So is there anything else that you want our audience to know about Theresa Diamond before we jump off into this
Yes.
major topic?
Yes. First, I want to give a couple of disclaimers. I'm not an attorney. I'm not what do they call those people? I'm just Theresa. This is just my opinion, and not only opinions, but I'm going to back it up with some literature. I was scouring some banker boxes at my home, and I came across a letter that I remember that I printed out in 1978 while I was attending college. And I remember how much of a visceral reaction I had to this letter. And this letter was to Clarence Thomas. And I remember how angry I had gotten. Well, I got just as angry a couple of weeks ago looking at it as I did in 1978. And then it reminded me and it made me reflect and think about just who he was, who he is. And like you said, there's good and bad and everything. I'm not here to blast Clarence Thomas. I'm here to educate people who don't know who Judge Higginbotham is, where Judge Clarence Thomas came from. Most people know he's married in an interracial relationship. Most people know he was in charge of the EEOC, but beyond that, most people don't remember things. Those are the two things that stick out to most people, and Anita Hill is the third one. I'm not here to talk about that necessarily, Anita Hill, because everybody knows that story. And I'm not here to take a side or anything. I want to share my thoughts on some giants like Judge Leon Higginbotham that a lot of people don't know about, and why he wrote an open letter to Judge Thomas when he first got appointed. So that's my goal today. And I hope that someone can learn something from me today that inspires them to go on and do some more research on it, because an hour is not sufficient to really get into all the nitty gritty. So I'm going to do as much as I can within the time frame.
And I just like I said, I'm ready to get off into this. Is just like you said, the title is "Who is Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas?" Why did you want to discuss this topic and this subject?
Well, he's been in the news lately, but what really bothered me was a couple of weeks ago he decided that a defendant whose last appeal based on their innocence is not worthy of their time. That you cannot appeal on the basis that you're innocent after X amount of years that you've been in jail. That's preposterous. And he just did it. I mean, so that person is going to be executed. And The fact that he took Thurgood Marshall's seat is a profound insult to anyone, not just Black people, to anyone, because after all, white people were involved in the civil rights movement too, but anybody with a conscience should be disturbed by his ability to single-handedly deny a person who is facing death an opportunity to display their innocence. It's crazy. You can't bring people back after you kill them.
You're absolutely right. You cannot. And first of all, can you explain to our viewers what is the Supreme Court? I mean, we heard about it, but a lot of people really don't know what it is.
Well, I didn't want to rely on my own definition of the Supreme Court because it wouldn't be appropriate for television. So what I did is actually looked up the structure of the Supreme Court to be more honest about it. Article 3 of the Constitution establishes the federal judiciary. Article 3, Section 1 states that, quote, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. Although the Constitution establishes the Supreme Court, it permits Congress to decide how to organize it. Congress first exercised this power of Judiciary Act of 1789. This act created the Supreme Court with 6 justices. It's also established a lower federal court system. You can fast forward to today, and it is 9 justices who sit on the Supreme Court. Now, justices are nominated by presidents, and they go through a process of first being nominated. Then typically they ask the ABA, the associations, attorney bar associations, to rate them, to rate the person that's been nominated. And they usually come back with a fair rate, and that's based on their writings, based on their things that they have done in their past as lawyers and things like that, or whatever jobs they held. And they usually put them in 3 categories: qualified, not qualified, and the third one, just let me take a look real quick. Well, I don't want to take up much time, but anyway, they kind of give a rubber stamp, not always in favor of the person who's been nominated, but they do review everything that person has done, and they give a recommendation of whether to support that nominee or not. Then it goes to a subcommittee, and then the subcommittee is all Congress people who sit on the judicial subcommittee, and then they go through what they deem is necessary to find out about this person's qualifications and et cetera, et cetera. And then once it passes through that committee, it goes to the full Congress for a vote. So now I wanted to go back to the Supreme Court in terms of its jurisdiction. Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution establishes the jurisdiction.
Why don't you hold that thought? Let's pick it up from Article 3 because we have to take a station break.
Okay.
When we come back, and we're gonna pick it up from there because this education is coming in, and I'm enjoying it already. And I tell you, wherever you're watching the show from, all you have to do is go to the comments, ask this great lady any question that you like. Join in with the discussion on the Supreme Court. It's your life. I'm Dr. James J. Cooley. We'll be back shortly after the break.
Noah Dingley here, producer of The James Cooley Show, It's Your Life. And the new audio version of James' book, Country Boy, City Boy, A Journey That Ain't Over Yet, is a must-have. James shares his true life story of struggle and success in America. It's both a cautionary tale and a roadmap to achieving the American dream. Get the new audio version of Country Boy, City Boy, A Journey That Ain't Over Yet by James Cooley on Amazon.com or wherever audiobooks are sold.
Hello, welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's Your Life, and one of my favorite guests, recurring guests always, Theresa Diamond, is always here to educate us, and she educating us today on the Supreme Court and some of the things about Clarence Thomas, and just give us an education because we all can learn. We all need to know, and so. If you want to be part of this conversation, all you have to do is just go to the comments, ask any question that you like. I promise you we'll get you an answer. Theresa, I want to pick it up with Article 3 because I was absorbing all of that information and I want to continue.
Okay. Article 3 of the Constitution establishes the legal ability to hear a case from any area. The Supreme Court has that power. The court has original jurisdiction. A case is tried before a court, or certain cases, suits between two or more states, and or cases involving ambassadors or public ministers. The court has appellate jurisdiction. That means if you want to appeal something, but they don't have to. The court can hear the case on appeal on almost any other case that involves a point of constitutional and or federal law. So this is pretty complex, and I would urge people to go on anything like Google or any other service and put in, enter Supreme Court background or Supreme Court structure, and it will break down the structure for you. The bottom line, though, now I'm not going to be reading anymore. The bottom line, though, is that the Supreme Court determines how our lives are carried out. They can make rules and regulations, and everybody is familiar with Roe v. Wade and what it has adversely done to women and their health concerns and abortion rights and all of that. But it's more than that. They control everything we do. They can determine what state rights are unconstitutional or constitutional. They really shape our country. They're the last stop when you want to get some relief in a case. And they don't hear every case. So, I mean, I don't know. I've never been inside of the Supreme Court. But I know some shenanigans go on, like this rocket docket they have, where they don't even have a full bench or anything. They just, if I'm from a certain jurisdiction, and a case comes from that jurisdiction, I can single-handedly say we're not going to hear it. without anybody else even chiming in on it. So there's some things that go on that the general public do not know about. Now, I'm not trying to sound like they're menacing. I think that they have too much power, actually. I think that the Supreme Court has too much power. One is their political appointments. I don't care who says that they're not, they are. And as divided as this country is, it's really doing us a disservice as citizens to rule in a religious way or rule in a political way. It's supposed to be for the good of the country. And if that is the underbelly, and if that is the way in which they're supposed to conduct themselves, then we have a big problem, because it depends on who's in office will determine what the court's makeup is. Right now it's 6-3, and I don't want to get into politics because this is not about politics. This is about our Constitution, we the people, and this is about our lives. So I want to get into Clarence Thomas, because when I started, I said that the biggest insult to African-American people, Black people, and anyone that has been active in fairness, civil rights, voting rights, anything like that, this was the biggest slap in our faces. That Clarence Thomas was nominated by George H.W. Bush to replace Thurgood Marshall. Now, I'm going to assume that people know who Thurgood Marshall is, but I just want to give you a quick overview. Everybody knows Brown versus Board of Education. They know that about him, but they know little else. So let me tell you very quickly some things about Thurgood Marshall. He was born July 2nd, 1908 in Baltimore, Maryland, and he died January 24th, 1993 in Bethesda. He was a lawyer, civil rights activist, and an associate justice of the U.S. Supreme Court from 1967 to 91. As an attorney, he successfully argued before the court of Brown versus Education of Topeka in 1954, which declared unconstitutional racial segregation in American public schools. Marshall was the son of William Canfield Marshall, a railroad porter and a steward at an all-white country club. Norma Williams Marshall, an elementary school teacher. He graduated with honors with Lincoln University in 1930. After rejected by the University of Maryland School of Law because he was not white, Marshall attended Howard University Law School. He received his degree in 1933. Now, I just want to fast forward on some big things that he did, other than the Brown versus Education. The first thing he did was the University of Maryland. He filed a lawsuit against the University of Maryland of violating the 14th Amendment guarantee of equal protection under the law by denying African Americans applicant admissions to his law school. That's what they did to him. So he took it upon himself to try to change that, and he did. He became, he was named chief of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. That's something that a lot of people talk about, but not enough. Throughout the 1940s and 50s, Marshall distinguished himself as one of the country's top lawyers, winning 29 of 32 cases that he argued before the Supreme Court. Among them were cases in which the court declared unconstitutional a southern state's exclusion of African-American voters from primary elections. That sound familiar?
Oh, yeah.
That's happening today. State judicial enforcement of racial restrictive covenants in housing and separate but equal facilities for African-American professionals and graduate students. So that's just to name a few of the things that he's done. Okay. So we can put a pin in that right now and talk about the legacy that he had, that Thurgood Marshall had. It's endearing. He laid an example for younger law students to come behind him. It's a legacy without any negativity, nothing. There's nothing about Thurgood Marshall that anyone on this planet could say that he didn't try to better our society, not just in law, but in deed and in the way in which he conducted his own life, and the way he conducted his own life on the bench after winning 28 of his 32 cases. So that's an exemplary example in my sight and in my view. So now that's who Clarence Thomas replaced. So now I want to give some factual information about Clarence Thomas. And then after that, and I know we probably have to take a break, but I'd like to share with your audience the open letter that federal judge Leon Higginbotham wrote to Clarence Thomas and why he decided to write it. But I want to focus on Clarence Thomas now.
Okay.
So Clarence Thomas was born June 23rd, 1948. He served as Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. He was nominated by President George H.W. Bush to succeed Thurgood Marshall, as he served since 1991. Thomas was born in Pinpoint, Georgia, after his father abandoned the family. He was raised by his grandfather in a poor Gullah community near Savannah. And a lot of people want to say, well, what's Gullah? Well, Gullah was a language that people used particularly in South Carolina, but also in Georgia. Growing up as a devout Catholic, I just want to put a pin in that. A devout Catholic. He originally intended to become a priest. And he went to Catholic church, but he was frustrated over the church's insufficient attempts to combat racism. Did you hear that? Okay. He abandoned his aspirations of becoming a clergyman to attend College of the Holy Cross and later Yale Law School, where he was influenced by a number of authors, notably Thomas Sowell. I don't have time to go into who he is. So if you can look him up, you'll find out what his thoughts were. Anyway, he worked for Senator Danforth in 1979 and was made an Associate Secretary for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education. In 1981, President Ronald Reagan appointed Thomas as chairman of the EEOC, that is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the next year. President George H.W. Bush nominated Thomas to the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia in 1990. Thomas described his descendants as enslaved people and spoke Gullah as a first language. Did you hear that?
All of this is new information. I'm learning.
Thomas's earliest known ancestors were slaves named Sandy and Peggy, who were born in the late 18th century and owned by wealthy planter Joshua Wilson of Liberty County, Georgia. Thomas's father left the family when Thomas was 2 years old. Though Thomas's mother worked long hours, she was sometimes paid only pennies per day, struggled to earn enough money to feed the family, and was forced to rely on charity. So he grew up very poor. After a house fire left them homeless, put a pin in that, Thomas and his younger brother Myers were taken to live in Savannah with their maternal grandparents. Raised Catholic, Thomas attended the predominantly Black St. Pius X High School in Chatham County. For 2 years, before transferring to St. John's, Vienna's minor seminary on the Isles Hope, where he was segregated. He was segregated during that. There was segregation in place. He briefly attended Conception Seminary College, a Catholic seminary in Missouri. He left the seminary soon after Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination, when he overheard a student say after the shooting, "Good, I hope that son of a bitch died." Thomas thought the church did not do enough to combat racism and resolved to abandon the priesthood.
Wow.
That's big. Did that sound like the person we know today?
I mean, all of this is educational to me. I tell you, we're going to take a station break, but we're going to come back and pick it up because I want to know, and I want the audience to know a lot more. Yeah, so if you want to be part of the conversation, just go to whatever platform you're watching on, ask any question that you like. We got a couple of questions that's standing by for you, Theresa, once we get back.
Okay.
It's your life. I'll see you shortly after the break.
Chance to know who you are. And once you know who you are, you truly know who you are, love who you are. Love who you are. You're a masterpiece. Love who you are. Love who you were born to be. Love me some me. That's what I'm talking about. When you leave high school, you gotta know today or tomorrow, or hopefully today, what your plans are. Hopefully, there is no bad decision unless there is no plan. Create, collaborate, commit with confidence. Commit with what? Commit with what? In everything that you do.
Hello, welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life, and I tell you, just like I told you, you in for education today, and a lot of things that Theresa is identifying. I mean, everyone need to know, especially in the Black communities, and not just the Black community, but all communities. We need to know who our leaders are. We need to know where they came from, how they became leaders. And just understand the systems that they're in, especially the Supreme Court. So got a good friend of mine's, Dr. Fred Johnson. How you doing, my friend? He's asking the question and said, Dr. Cooley, based on what Ms. Diamond is saying, what should we be doing pretty much in the community? Well, I can say, man, we need to get a better understanding of our leaders in our communities, and we need to be able to help out in any way we can to help uplift and educate our youth and young adults and people that are in our communities. And we need to, most importantly, get educated. Educate yourself on all things that is possible, so you have an understanding of all things possible. Case in point, the Supreme Court. Many of us don't know what it's made up of. We know it's nine, but we really don't know what type of power and the things that they are doing. So, Dr. Fred, I think that's one of the things that we need to be doing in the community. Theresa, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, Dr. Fred, that's a really good question. Um, I think that since we're all preoccupied with cell phones and tablets and all of that, we should use it for good use as well as entertainment. You could just go to WikiLeaks, Wikipedia. I'm sorry, not WikiLeaks, Wikipedia, and you can find out anything about anyone. In particular, you can find this history, and that you should teach it to your children. I remember in elementary school, I went to elementary school in Harlem, and this is unheard of, but my teacher was from the Watusi tribe. She was very tall, very dark, and we were scared of her because of her height. But every Friday, she separated the boys and the girls in the classroom, and she had us recite one black inventor. So what that translated into for me was pride in black people. If only we would do something like this to let kids know who these people are. You can draw your own conclusions about that. But we ought to know who's running our government, not only congressmen and congresswomen. We need to know who's making decisions about our lives. And I think that knowing who these people are makes a difference in your voting and everything else. Like I said, we don't have enough time to go into it, but that's a great question.
Wow. So I want to get back to, because I want to hear about this Judge Higginbotham. And I want to hear that letter that you are going to read. So I'm on the edge of my seat.
Okay, I just want to, I guess I need to summarize it in order for me to go, but I think it's important to lay the foundation of what Judge Clarence Thomas used to do, because that's important for you to understand the letter. So let me just go through a couple of things that he did. Okay. He became acquainted with the Black separatist movement, the Black Muslim movement, the Black Power movement, and displayed a poster of Malcolm X in his dormitory. He also attended Black anti-war marches and participated in the 1970 Harvard Square riots. I think I can stop there, because then this letter will put everything in perspective. Now, Judge Higginbotham came along the same ranks as Thurgood Marshall, civil rights activist, lawyer, and he contemplated and deliberated several days before deciding whether to make the letter to Clarence Thomas public or. So I just like to go through some highlights. And in the highlights, I will let you know what he said himself, not me, what he said and why he decided to make it public. This is the most scathing, educational, forethought print of literature I've ever read in my life. And I hope you find it interesting, and you can go on Google and find it easily. Okay, so he wrote this November 29th, 1991. And I'll just do some highlights. It has been a long time since we talked. I believe it was 1980, during your first year at trustee at Holy Cross College. I was there to receive an honorary degree. You were 31 years old and on the staff of Senator Danworth. You had not yet started your climb through the government and federal judiciary hierarchy. Much has changed since then. At first, I thought I should write you privately, the way one normally corresponds with a colleague or a friend. I still feel ambivalent about making this letter public, but I do so because your appointment is profoundly important to this country and the world, and because all Americans need to understand the issues you will face on the Supreme Court. In short, Justice Thomas, I write this letter as a public record so that this generation can understand the challenges you face as an associate judge to the Supreme Court, and next can evaluate the choices you have made or will make. Now, that's why he wrote it, and that's why he made it public. And I just want to skip to some highlights of, I've never heard anything like this in my life until I read this when it came out. Someone gave it to me in college. So, okay. By elevating you to the Supreme Court, President Bush has subtly vested you in the option to preserve or dilute the gains this country has made in the struggle for equality. This is a grave responsibility indeed. And while much has been said about your admiration, determination to overcome terrible obstacles, it is also important to remember how you arrived where you are now, because you did not get there by yourself. Now, I could stop right there, but I think it's important to go on and give some more information about this letter. You have to understand, no judge writes a public letter to another judge about anything. And so this was a very hard decision for him. And I don't think he was just critiquing him. He was giving him assurances about things. He wanted him to be successful, but he told the unadulterated truth to Clarence Thomas. It's like telling somebody in their face, okay. When I think of your appointment to the Supreme Court, I see not only the result of your own ambition, but also accumulation of years of heartbreaking work by thousands who preceded you. I know you may not want to be burdened by the memory of their sacrifices, but I also know that you have no right to forget that history. Your life is very different from what I would have been. Your life is very different. I'm sorry. Your life is very different from what I would have been had these men or women never lived. That is why today I write to you, because this country's history of civil rights lawyers and civil rights organizations, and its history of voting rights, and its history of housing and privacy rights, this history has affected our past and present life. And 40 years from now, when your grandchildren and other Americans measure your performance on the Supreme Court, that same history will determine whether you fulfilled your responsibility with the vision and grace of the justices whose seat you have taken to fill. Thurgood Marshall. So I can stop reading from the letter. I would encourage everyone. It's 24 pages. It's an easy read. You can feel the gravity of the seriousness on these pages that Judge Higginbotham wrote. You could feel at the same time the sentiment and encouragement from him to Clarence Thomas, trying to tell him and direct him to just do the right thing. Not what he wanted, but just do the right thing in fairness to all people, not just Black people. So now I'm going to go, what they say, I'm going to go street. Okay, so that's all the formal stuff. And that's not Theresa's stuff. That's stuff I got by doing my research. And I had that letter since, I don't know, years and years and years ago when I attended John Jay College. it's not just that, everybody knows that people refer to Judge Clarence Thomas as Uncle Tom. I don't use that frame because he's really not an Uncle Tom. The real Uncle Tom is another topic for another day.
Mhm.
I don't look at him as that, and I don't look at him through a political lens. I think he is a despicable, resentful person who every day that looks in the mirror wishes he were white.
Mhm.
I think he has Black resentment. His life compared to a lot of African American life was very similar. I mean, I grew up poor. He grew up poor. I fortunately did not have a fire, but they had a fire and they were moved to somewhere else with their he started out being a Malcolm X cheerleader. What happened? What happened to him?
This is fascinating. Keep going.
I mean, I think as human beings, we develop, we tend to take things and we evolve. And I mean, I'm not saying that he didn't evolve the way I wanted him to. I'm just saying, look at his character. How can you go from being anti-racist to racist, pretty much? He is even standing in the way of things that he's involved in. For instance, I don't even want to go with the Jets and all of that. I don't care about that. He's in an interracial marriage. How could you be in an interracial marriage and make statements from the bench of the Supreme Court about, well, we have to revisit those issues too? What is he going to do? Throw his wife out and divorce her? I mean, it's contrary to the life he lives. He lives a life of privilege. That doesn't entitle you to sanction, restrict, or do any other thing to anybody else. That you're living contrary to what you're espousing. Either he's crazy, which I'm not excluding, or he's got some mental health issues, or it's political. I don't want to go political because that's just it's just a barrel of different stuff, and you get nowhere. You just argue.
And you're right. We don't want to go political, but
yeah,
he has done a lot of questionable things over the last few years that brings attention to everyone, and the thought process. Don't know why he's doing those things, but I believe it's hurting America as a whole, especially African Americans, and in our communities and stuff. But we're going to take a station break, but we're going to pick it up when we get back, and we're going to continue to talk about this very interesting subject. And if you want to be part of this conversation, just go to the comments, ask any questions that you like. It's your life. I'm Dr. James J.C. Cooley. We'll see you shortly after the break. Hello, welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life, and I tell you, when I mention education, this is education, and we all need to know. We all are learning things. I believe that we did not know before, and just like Theresa had mentioned, you can go and you can do your research on all of this stuff yourself and become better educated and get a better understanding. But before we move on, I had to always put a plug in for my new book that was released number one, number one release and number one bestseller. And it's continuing to be doing well. It's called A Black Man Point of View, Mind, Body, and Soul. And it's not just all about Black people, but if you ever want to know why some of the thoughts that us as African American men are thinking and why we think these way, it goes back to 400 years of slavery. It goes back to colonization. It goes back to us being taken away from our land and the struggles and all the things that we had to go through in order to be able to be the persons and our forefathers and our ancestors endured to make sure that we have an opportunity to excel. That's what a Black man point of view is all about. And I tell you what, women out there, if you ever want to know what's going on in our minds, read the book, get the book, share the book. It's a roadmap to a lot of things that we are experiencing today and how we overcame all of those things to become the person and learn to love, not hate, learn to accept all mankind, regardless of black, white, pink, gold, or purple. Theresa, I want to pick it back up because this is so intriguing. And a lot of the things that that we're learning today, what are some of the things that we can do to try to overcome some of the situations, circumstances that we were placed in? I'm talking about that relate to Clarence Thomas and the appointment that him filling the shoes of Thurgood Marshall. How can we get back on track? And what are some of the things that we have to do to refocus?
Well, I wish I had the answer to that because I'd get a Pulitzer Prize. But but to be honest with you, Supreme Court justices have lifetime. They can stay on the bench until they die if they want to. And so there is some rumblings going around now about expanding the Supreme Court, but I don't think changing the numbers necessarily would do it. I think most people look at, and this is just my opinion, I think most people look at Democrat versus Republican and to even the numbers up, but it's more than that. How do they get there? That means Congress has to approve of them. So the answer, in my humble opinion, is vote, vote, vote. Vote from the librarian to the city council because these people rise up through these ranks. I saw one question that someone put in the comments section there. You think that it was he, in other words, did he have the hookup? Of course he did. It was about who he knew, and they considered them impartial as one of them, and they elevated him through. But before I finish that, I just want to read another part, an excerpt from Higginbotham's letter.
Let's keep in mind we got about 2 minutes to go in the whole
show. Oh my God. Okay. I have read almost every article you publish, every speech you have given, and virtually every public comment you have made during the past decade. Until your confirmation hearing, I could not find one shred of evidence suggesting an insightful understanding on your part of how the evolutionary movement of the Constitution and the work of the civil rights organizations have benefited you.
Wow. That's deep.
That is deep. I wish we had more time.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, we can pick this up some more time, but in 30 seconds or less, or 40 seconds, what are some takeaways that you want our viewers to get from this discussion?
Well, I'd like to encourage them to go and do some research. Just read about it. See how that makes you feel. My soul was disturbed. I don't know if yours will be, but it's such a opposite of how most African Americans feel about life in general and their leaders. And so I would encourage you to please just go look, research every justice on there, research everyone, and understand how the system works, and vote, 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 vote.
And that's what it's all about, Theresa. I would like open invitation. You already know that.
Yeah.
And we can talk about this and other things because you're going to continue to be a regular part of the show unless you don't have time. So I'd like to thank you for taking the time to come on the show today. I'd like to thank Dr. Michelle Cooley for putting together another great show. Most importantly, I'd like to thank our viewers and our listeners for tuning into the James Cooley Show. It's your life every day. I tell you, always dream big, think big, and be big. We'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same place. It's your life. We'll see you tomorrow.